Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully you came to the Building Businesses for Good, lessons from business leaders that prioritize the planet and people while maximizing profit. That is the room you're supposed to be in. We're glad to have you here. Feel free to tell your friends to join us as well. I can see there's a few more people coming in, but we'll just go ahead and get started. We've got a great panel here. I'm really excited to be with you all again, talking about cannabis, how cannabis can be a catalyst for change, and specifically in this panel, talking about what we can learn from businesses and organizations in the natural products industry that have done this successfully, and might have some wise words to share with those of you in the cannabis industry that are looking to create triple bottom line businesses. And if you don't want to know what a triple bottom line business is, you're definitely in the right room. So to get started, I'm going to introduce the other panelists. My name's Goggin. I'm the founder of an agency, Guru, that works across the cannabis and natural product space, working with finding the most conscious brands in different verticals and helping them build and try to push categories towards a more conscious place. We also do a lot of work across cannabis and psychedelics as the agency for MAPS. We've also got Reem Rahim here, who is one of the founders of Numi Tea and CMO, creative extraordinaire. Really exciting for her to share with you all. We've got Neil Gottlieb from Three Twins Ice Cream. Everyone knows Three Twins. If you don't, you will soon. And then Andrew Kahan, Community Engagement Manager for B Corp, for B Labs and the B Corp certification, which hopefully everyone here has heard of, and if not, you'll hear more about here in a second. So just to kind of set a little context, and I'll pass it around. Really we were asked to do a panel to learn from where conscious business and how business can be a force for good, in the wider sphere, specifically natural products. And I think a great person to maybe kick us off in that would be Andrew, to speak a little bit about conscious business, maybe even the conscious business movement, and B Corp overall as a certification, what that has done across other industries. So Andrew, maybe you could kick us off just to give some context around, what is conscious business overall, and we say that.
That's a lofty question. I'm happy to answer in the context of the B Corp certification and community. So my name is Andrew Kahn, based in Philly, and have been at B Lab, which is the nonprofit behind the B Corp certification. I've been there about 2.5 years now. And as I said, the B Corp certification and community is a global movement of almost 4,000 companies worldwide using business as a force for good. So beyond a product and a service, the certification really measures a company's entire social and environmental impact on all of their stakeholders, which includes the environment, the community, workers, and customers. So there's a large ecosystem. We acknowledge that the B Corp movement is one amongst many pushing this conscious consumerism and conscious business, pushing the needle forward. And essentially how the certification works, it is positive impact that you accumulate through the assessment as measured by our standards, supported by transparency in making your impact public, and accountability and changing the legal framework of your business so that you're able to account and make decisions on behalf and on the benefit of all stakeholders, not just the shareholders of your company. So we're ultimately aiming to upend shareholder primacy and make sure that all stakeholders are allowed to be accounted for in the decisions that leaders are making.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that overall context.
Yep.
You know, B Corp was as I see it, really has been a major, you know, tentpole in this movement for conscious business. There's a lot of greenwashing, and this is, you know, in business, kind of trying to maybe communicate around sustainability initiatives or other things that maybe they weren't necessarily actually doing or validating that they were doing. And about 20 years ago, you know, B Labs came around and said, hey, let's start to certify folks that they're actually doing these things around specifically ESG, you know, environmental, social, governance initiatives. Let's not let people just kind of talk about it. Let's make sure they're actually doing these things. And kind of a simple framework that I've thought about in terms of conscious business is almost that there's kind of two overarching areas of business for good, if you will. One is, how do you deliver your product or service in the most conscious way possible? And that's really looking at things like supply chain and organic and non-GMO, and, you know, really how you're creating your widgets and how you're distributing them. How are you doing that in the most conscious way possible? Running your business in the most conscious way possible. And then there's this other piece, which is really around give back, or how do you give back to the world, you know, in some way. And that might be kind of oversimplistic to bifurcate it in that way, but at least for me, that's helped to make sense. I'd love it to just kind of look at the first part of that to start, you know, how you deliver your products in the most conscious ways possible. And I think, you know, Reem, I'd love, maybe you could talk a little bit about NUMI, and specifically really interested in, I mean, you all have been just major advocates around fair trade, and other areas of how you deliver your product in the most conscious way possible. Maybe you could talk a little bit about NUMI and how you and your brother Ahmed, you know, these principles you founded the company with, and how they've continued to drive the overall organization.
Sure. Well, so we started 22 years ago, and small entrepreneurial business. And at first we weren't fair trade. We were sourcing, you know, I think times have changed because there's so much kind of higher awareness around these principles, and so much more access to accountability, like B Labs does, B Corp does, and certifications that you can do. And then there's so many more farms that are now fair trade certified. So, you know, we kind of, I always think that sustainability it's not an absolute, it's a process. So you're always, you know, getting better and better, and, you know, upping your score, you know, in terms of what B Corp does. And so we kind of, as we kind of in our first 5 years, we made these really pivotal, important decisions, and it was aligned to our principles and aligned to our values. So transitioning the whole, all the teas and the herbs that we purchased to be 100% organic, that was one kind of stake in the road that we decided was extremely important to us, to not pollute the planet, but to regenerate the planet. And then we also, at some point, when Transfair kind of was developing their program, we joined forces with them. We were a founding B Corp because those principles aligned. And so when we transitioned our teas to be fair trade certified, it was a matter of linking to farms that that already had the certification, or that we transitioned that farm to be fair trade certified. So, you know, again, it's not a perfect system. So you would have to find, you know, we didn't want to sabotage relationships that we already had. There are some farmer relationships we've had for 22 years, and they've transitioned to be fair trade certified. So what fair trade is it's a give back program, in the sense that you are purchasing from developing countries, China, India, predominantly for us, and there is we pay a premium above what you would normally pay for non-fair trade teas. And then there's a council of elders, women and men in many of these farms that vote on where those premiums will go. So anything from a road for children to be able to go to school, or a bus for them to go to school so they're not walking miles and miles, to mosquito nets to prevent malaria, to stoves in their households. I mean, you know, you're talking about basic things, but really important things for these communities to be able to improve their livelihoods. You know, sometimes maternity benefits, sometimes college sponsorships, all kinds of things that that they vote on to figure out what they want to do with those funds. So since our 20 years, we've basically given back over $1 million, if we add it all up, in fair trade premiums to these farming communities. Almost 15,000 people we've affected, you know, with our fair trade, as well as other programs that we've done. So I think that covers fair. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say is that where we did not have fair trade certified farms, we actually co-created a new certification called Fair Labor and Community Benefits Program. And that's another point system. And it basically ensures that you get overtime if you're paid overtime. I mean, little things that we take for granted here that may not exist in other countries. So it kind of lifts the boat. And so for us, it all lifts the boat. You know, when you're pulling people out of poverty, you're lifting all boats. So that's what's really important about it. And you're kind of taking care of your supply chain every step of the way. And with fair labor, this certification that we co-created, it can be verified in anywhere in the world, including our grape pickers in California. So that's where it might benefit the cannabis community.
That's really interesting. I'm so glad you touched on that, because you know, that's kind of been, I think, a bit of an issue in the United States, and that we, you know, the fair trade, kind of the differentiation between fair trade in other countries and then in the United States. And so folks have been forced to create these certifications. But the certification is important, actually validating this, right, and making sure. So I'm gonna come back to that in a second, but there really is such a parallel to the cannabis industry. And I'll come back to a certification that we worked on developing, actually with the folks from Dr. Bronner's and others, called Sun and Earth certification, which includes a fair trade piece, but you can't say fair trade, right? The other piece it has in there is organic, but you can't say organic because legally, you know, it's a national certification, and cannabis isn't legal, you know, nationally. So that's a great segue. Neil, I was hoping that I love how you have Three Twins organic ice cream. I mean, that's what it says in the name. It's like there is an absolute commitment to that. I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about organic, the commitment there, and how that even, you know, some of the other aspects maybe that Reem talked about.
Yeah, so my name is Neil Gottlieb. I founded Three Twins Ice Cream in 2005, and we had quite a run over 15 years, going from one tiny little scoop shop where I was the main dishwasher and ice cream maker and the person serving everybody, to building it into a national brand and beyond. But it's also a cautionary tale, because Three Twins closed last April, not because of the pandemic, actually just kind of coincidental timing, because we could never get to a place of sustained profitability, and some things changed, and you know, the company ran out of money. So the name is actually incorrect in the title. It's just Three Twins Ice Cream, but the corporation was Three Twins Organic, and everything that we did was organic, with the goal of making great stuff where consumers felt like they didn't need to give anything up in order to eat organic. So that meant every single thing that we did was certified organic. We also did have the world's first organic fair trade ice cream, which I was very proud of. It wasn't all of our flavors. That wasn't really conceivable with our margin structure, but we did offer a line of organic fair trade ice cream, and then really tried to do other things in order to make the brand, you know, as environmentally friendly as possible, taking into account that the packaging itself could not be recyclable or compostable. But we, you kind of have to work within the constraints of what's possible. And in our case, for packaging, there was nothing that was approved, and still isn't anything, as far as I know, that's approved. That's compostable. But with that in mind, we were also a member of 1% for the Planet. So really trying to be, a great corporation offering great stuff. Our stumbling block, was that our prices were too low and our margin structure was too low. So going largely through the channel of grocery stores and their extremely large discounts that we have to offer in a competitive category like ice cream, it just beat us up over time and eventually led to the downfall. So, an important message is that it's great to be kind and wonderful and organic and to give back, but it has to be within a framework that can also be profitable, or else, you'll be a CEO emeritus just like myself.
Well, thanks for sharing. That's amazing. I mean, if you wouldn't mind, that's a really beautiful and transparent share. I think there's a lot to learn in that story. I mean, when I opened up the talk, I talked about triple bottom line, and I know, the word sustainability, 20 years ago, people just thought of it as kind of environmental sustainability. It was kind of a look almost as cost center. It's the nice to have, reduce energy usage, reduce water usage. That was sustainability. And then this, it kind of grew into sustainability being this triple bottom line, the 3 Ps, really looking at, people, so taking care of people, like fair trade, planet, environmental, and then profit is sustainability as well. And what you're pointing at is, you can't lose sight of that 3rd P, right? Like trying to make the most conscious ice cream on the planet, and make that accessible to folks. Like everyone deserves to have access to organic ice cream. And so you lower the prices, and then it affected that third P, the profitability piece of sustainability. Curious if there's anything else that you'd want to share in that journey, overall, and kind of how you just stayed committed to your values, but the difficulty between profit and those values.
Yeah, I mean, the big bet from the beginning was that, well, if we go after a lower price, for ease of conversation, I would say just, within $1 of a pint of Ben & Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs, the theory was that it will offer such great value to the consumer that they'll become loyal customers and they'll end up, purchasing a lot. And while we'll have a relatively low margin, we'll make up for it in the volume. And that did work for some time. But then there were a number of factors like increased costs from organic dairy and vanilla to increased competition in the premium ice cream space, that eventually, unfortunately made it not work. And when it stops working, it can stop working pretty quickly, especially, as the timing coincides with, a global pandemic, which made it really impossible for us to bring in the infusion of cash that we needed at the last minute. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to keep going?
I was just saying the dog barking as it's Rumo. He's very protective.
Oh, good. All are welcome here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cannabis industry is, I'm hearing some similar issues, where folks that are trying to innovate around packaging, folks that are trying to innovate around how they grow, regenerative, for instance, looking at soil health, and practices that have worked for a long time. These are hard practices to scale and still hit a price point to make it accessible and keep it profitable. It's a really tough line to navigate. So I also see a question here. Feel free to keep them coming in the Q&A, and I'll try to get to them as we're moving through. There's a question from Canvas Therapeutics that is there a way for cannabis to grow nationally while still maintaining environmental standards as well as product quality standards? So I'll take my my best shot at that because I have been pretty deep in the certification process around cannabis, which is this Sun and Earth certification we developed here, which does seem to be one of the more leading certifications now in California cannabis. It's really three main values: fair trade, organic, and then regenerative, or soil health, as I said before. And so our hope is that more California farmers will start leaning into that, because we believe that it does have the most aspirational kind of environmental standards. It's based off of another certification that we developed in the natural products industry called the Regenerative Organic certification with Patagonia and others. But that over the next couple of years, as advocacy continues to roll, that whatever happens in California will hopefully lead the way to the rest of the country. And that some of these certifications or values will be, distributed nationwide, hopefully internationally at some point. Highest percentage of cannabis is grown in California, actually Northern California in the world by a long shot. And so the hope is that perhaps, that will happen. And I think cannabis is taking a lot of cues from the natural products industry. So with that, I'd love to actually hear, Andrew, maybe you could speak a little bit to, just the role that certification could play. I mean, even B Corp, like how that has grown as a movement, knowing that this is, and I know it's across industries, right? It's not just CPG or natural products, it's across all kinds of companies. We're a B Corp, for instance, and we're a creative agency. So maybe you could speak a little bit to how that movement's grown, and maybe we can learn a little bit from that for the cannabis industry.
Yeah, sure thing. So something that you brought up earlier that I think ties in nicely is just the value of certification as far as educating consumers, especially in a new industry and a booming industry like cannabis. You have a new shelf crowded with new products that consumers and policymakers are having a hard time distinguishing between good companies and good marketing. And I think the B Corp certification, alongside a lot of the other certifications out there, do a fantastic job of letting consumers know off the jump to sort of cut through some of that marketing. And that's what we really hope that the B Corp certification is able to do. We admittedly lean on a lot of our B Corps to be brand ambassadors and help increase the value of the B Corp certification. A lot of the brands within the community have the loudest voices and the biggest reach brand-wise. So we work with brands to help them unpack what the certification means and infuse that value into the DNA of their company, but also into their messaging internally, externally, engaging their stakeholders in the process, so that the more familiarity there is with it, the more recognition and value that folks or brands are receiving through the certification. And again, it's a free tool. So we have, I think, over 75,000 folks, companies around the world using this tool, though only 4,000 are able to be certified. So definitely encourage anyone that is considering starting a new business or starting their impact journey to use the tool, and check out bcorporation.net. It's a worthwhile process regardless of whether you get through the certification or not, because it's a set of guardrails and a tool to benchmark. And I think it should be used ultimately in conjunction with others. Like, we recognize, especially within the cannabis industry, like we are not the leaders there. We look to a certification like Sun and Earth as we evolve our standards to see what else is best practice out in the market. And then, even though it's a slow process, sometimes it doesn't evolve at the speed of the industry. We're heading in that direction. And I can drop in the chat our stance as an organization and as a certification on the cannabis industry, so you can understand how it will relate to your company. But generally speaking, it's really valuable to just engaging all your stakeholders in your impact journey. And most importantly, or not most importantly, but importantly, educating your consumers. Yeah, I think I'll pause there.
Andrew, also there's a question in there, and I know this isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, but maybe you can give some ideas.
Yeah,
How much
sure.
does it typically cost to go through the B Corp process?
That's a great question, Lily. So it doesn't take, you only pay once you certify. So as certification fees is what you're paying on an annual basis to maintain your certification, and you're required to recertify once every 3 years. So you can actually see on bcorporation.net a fee table which scales along with the revenue of your company. So rather than just throw out some random numbers, you can go check on our website. It's public, but only when you certify are you paying that fee. But the tool again is free for use, and free for use, along a multi-year journey. If you decide to certify, that's wonderful. But if not, I think there's a lot of value there just to engage as a framework to think about impact and how it maps to all the strategic decisions that you're making, especially when you're starting out your business. And I'll drop those links in the chat right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's, it's early days for B Corp with cannabis. So it's kind of an exciting time if you are a cannabis company that's thinking about that, to utilize the tool to, it's a great rubric for thinking about how you can use your business as a force for good in various ways, both developing a more conscious business, also your give back. But it's also B Corp, has gained a lot of momentum over the last few years, and consumers know about it. And so, when consumers are shopping with their values out there, they're turning packages around and they're looking for some of these things. They're looking for that B Corp logo, the 1% for the planet, other things. So, yeah, highly recommend everyone to go check that out. Reem, you got something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm not sure where the cannabis industry is at, but when we first started transitioning our teas to be organic, we found that the quality of the organic teas were not as good, or I would say the taste was not as good as the non-organic and the conventional teas. So that became a process for the farmers to improve their processing and their techniques. And as we know, sometimes it takes 3 years to convert a garden to be organic. And they were planting, trees to ward off the insects and things like that. And now those trees are huge. So it kind of took some time for the farming practices to convert. So I'm not sure where cannabis is at, but to address the quality point. And then the second point I wanted to make is that we try to educate. It's probably not a well-known fact, but that tea is a consumed product that you put in hot water, and it does not get washed before it hits the water. So unlike apples or strawberries or whatever that are conventional and non-organic that are sprayed with pesticides, you can wash it. You can at least wash them off, whereas tea does not get washed. The first time it is washed is in your cup. So, there could be some sort of spin, I won't call it a marketing spin, but a truth that can be unfolded in the cannabis industry around non-organic. I mean, not only that it's, of course, good for the planet and good for the people picking it, so they're not contaminated, but, good for the consumer, because the consumer is always looking out for themselves at the end. So, how do you bring that benefit to life for the consumer to understand that what they're putting in their body, you want to put, the best in your body, and the benefits, the other effects that it'll have when it is organic versus when it's not. So just kind of to dive deeper and to really refine that message to get across to your consumer that, the effects will be that much stronger and much purer. And, just understanding the language and looking for the language to use in this industry.
Great point. Thank you.
Yeah, around a clean high or whatever you want. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Whether you're talking about a high from tea or a high from cannabis, right? Like it's absolutely. And someone, McGregor asked a great question in the Q&A. He said, with such segmentation in the industry from cultivation to extraction, product development, brand, retail, et cetera, how might different certifications interplay or work together to govern the whole supply chain? Or is a different approach needed for cannabis? Well, one, I don't think a different approach is needed for cannabis. There's natural product has a great models to follow. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of great models to follow based on, what goes in versus what comes out. There's certifications for various things like non-GMO versus organic. There's fair trade, like we talked about earlier. There's quite a few different certifications, actually too many when you're dealing with small packaging, which I know you are with cannabis, to try to fit all these different, certifications and marks all over it. So I think the same process is needed. Now, Sun and Earth, which I don't mean to harp on it so much, but the thought there was that how do you create a more aspirational certification that can encompass a few, right? So the soil health, sun-grown, soil health, organic, fair trade, that kind of encompasses, a few of those things there. Now, it's not perfect, and it's expensive to transition in that way. So that's where I think some folks are really getting caught up. And the industry with certifications and whatnot is still pretty early. And there's different certifications kind of, one coming in from different, many coming in from different angles within that whole product development chain that you referred to there. So, we could dive a little deeper on that question if you'd like. But I think following close to natural products or close to ag is really important. I think, personally, my viewpoint, I know others involved with this symposium, are that cannabis is just another form of agriculture. It's another natural product. And we need, obviously there's psychoactive, parts to it as well, which can be governed through dosage and things like that. But overall, it's a plant, and it needs to be governed as such and certified as such in the same ways that others have in the past. So feel free to expand on that question if I didn't quite hit exactly what you wanted to hit on, McGregor, or we can even give you sound perhaps to contribute. So I also want to talk a little bit about, we talked a lot about kind of how your products, developed in the most conscious way possible. I also want to talk about this area of give back a little bit. It's a part of the B Corp certification. It's kind of a percentage of giving back. And I know it's been a huge part, as Reem was talking about earlier with NUMI, in their general, framework. But Neil, you also did some really innovative things around giving back. I wonder if you could maybe share a little bit about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started Three Twins, like I said, in 2005, and within a year joined 1% for the Planet. And the reason I joined 1% for the Planet, which is a consortium of businesses that agree to give 1% of top line sales rather than, say, a percentage of profits, I feel like there's so much inauthenticity in corporate giving back, because so many corporations, companies will say, we give back a percentage of our profits. And of course, if you've ever taken an accounting class, you can easily manipulate profits. And so many of small businesses just don't make any money, especially in the early years. So to say you're giving this away, but in actuality, you're not, is inauthentic and something of greenwashing. So I joined 1% for the Planet because it is that promise and that contract that you give away 1% of your sales, regardless of profitability. There you go, right there. It was founded by Yvon Chouinard and another individual whose name I can't remember. Yvon is the founder of Patagonia. And that was great, but I felt like we could take it a step further and really let consumers know what we were doing with that portion of their sales, because some consumers would be stoked if we were giving our 1% to the Earth Liberation Front, and others would be really turned off by it. So I felt like it was important to easily package up and let consumers know how we were giving back. So I started our own land conservation initiative called Ice Cream for Acres. And through that, depending on what container of ice cream you bought, you funded the purchase of a certain number of square feet of land. So a pint was 6 square feet, a quart was 12, a single ice cream cone was like 2 feet. And that was a way for consumers to really understand what their purchase was helping to move towards. And it also held us accountable, because then, that's where the money was going. And it was great because it was one more, piece of marketing that we could put out there, because, corporate giving is not altruism. It's ultimately for you to build upon your brand, sell more product, and of course, give more back. But that allowed us to, really communicate to the consumers about what we were doing, but then also give the message that, such a seemingly insignificant choice, such as which ice cream to buy, could really actually add up to have profound impact. Over the roughly 5 years that we had Ice Cream for Acres, we funded the purchase of over 8,000 acres of land. So it was a rather significant amount.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and Reem, I know you spoke a little bit to it earlier, but I'm just also thinking about specifically in regards to cannabis. I love what you all have done around, really taking care of the farmers and their communities. I know there's historically been some issues in the cannabis industry where, farmers, and particularly the communities. I know I live in Northern California. A lot of the farm workers, migrant farm workers, are kind of living in means that are marginalized, and a lot of the farmers that you're also that you're helping around the world. It seems to be kind of a core piece to what you all have done in growing the tea company. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So we, beyond the fair trade, we wanted to do something to give back. And we created a foundation, which is a nonprofit arm of the company. And it was probably about 6-7 years ago where we kind of had this aha moment that you can't drink tea without water, and you certainly can't drink tea without clean, safe drinking water. And almost 800 million people on the planet do not have access to clean, safe drinking water. And so we wanted to kind of create that full circle of, we calculated how many boxes of tea we had sold. Till that point, we calculated how many bags of tea and how many gallons of water. We had kind of encouraged our audience and our consumers to enjoy freely, as we do here. So we really wanted to make water a core issue. And we decided to start at the farm level, because at that point we were purchasing our turmeric from Madagascar. And anytime we go to the farms, and we have a lot of, direct sourcing relationships, we'd ask them what they need. And they were drinking water from dirty rivers. Madagascar is the 9th poorest country in the world. And they said they need clean water, and they've got all kinds of waterborne illnesses in the children. So we immediately turned our focus there and raised, over $90,000. And, these are small projects for small companies, but, you got to start somewhere. So we did that, and we hired a local engineering company. We assessed the water tables, and we built, within that sort of 6 to 9 months, we built 25 wells for those communities. They had clean water tables underground. That was the first time they've had clean water in their lives, in their children's lives, and will for generations to come. And we've also funded the constant, breakdowns in those wells. So that's an ongoing project. So in Madagascar, we had affected about 5,000 villagers, farmers and their families. And then we also turned to India, which is where we purchase our Assam black tea in Assam, India. And on that tea estate, they had wells, but the wells were contaminated because monsoon season, brought up all the dirt and whatever. And so they were contaminated with E. coli, and they also had their latrines very close to their wells. So that became more of we partnered up with local partners and partner here in California. And we created sanitation, hand washing and sanitation programs. And we delivered about 1,000 water filters to all the homes so they can filter the water more. And that has reduced the absenteeism from work and from school 90%, because the kids and the parents are healthier to be able to to live their lives. So that was another project we did in India. So we kind of just really micro focus our attention to our farming community so we can really evolve and help them improve their lives. So from the Fair Trade to our Together for Hope project, we did, that's our way of kind of giving back and kind of taking care of our global family in that sense. These are all the people that make the tea happen.
It's really beautiful, and I love how all the projects, they're regenerative projects. Giving people clean water, giving people education. These are projects that are going to continue feeding that community forever.
And to say what was great about those two projects is that the community got involved. So in Madagascar, they ended up funding one of the wells with their fair trade funds. And in India, the women mostly did all the training. So they created songs and they designed T-shirts. So they really was an empowerment project for the local community, and especially the women, to teach their kids and to, just improve their lives. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And, I put Numi's website in the chat, so you can click there and read more about all these different projects. It's really pretty amazing, the impact that they've had around the world and in those communities. And the secret that we all know, which I was reminded by the funky head MC Zach Carson here, is that it's not just about doing good. This actually is regenerative to the bottom line of the business as well. Like, people buy Numi tea because they want to shop with their values. They don't leave those values at the door of their local bud tender. So it's really an opportunity. But when you do this as a company, it's not about just talking about it. You have to authentically do it first. It's kind of first establishing those values that you want to live by as an organization, thinking about what your theory of change is beyond just selling cannabis. What do you really want to, how do you want to make the world a better place? And then leading into that, getting your stakeholders aligned around that theory of change and around that purpose that you as a leader or you as a company have. And then effectively communicating that to the broader ecosystem, to the stakeholders around you, the bud tenders, so that they can talk about that project or that difference, and to the end consumers, at the end of the day. One of the brands that we work with that I'm really proud of is Farmer and the Felon, which I think right now is like the number 4 or 5 flower brand in California. Amazing brand, giving back to the Last Prisoner Project, working on decrim. And so that, that has shown in how well they've done just over they've only been around for a year and a half. And they've already climbed to be, number 4 or 5 flower brand in the state. And we attribute a lot of that to the marketing and the branding of Farmer and the Felon, but authentically, we're giving back to that effort. So the more cannabis we sell, the more we can give back to that initiative, which the founders truly care about, and the entire team's excited about. And that's one of the side benefits as well. Your team will be more excited. They will perform better when they're on purpose. So anyways, that's the soapbox for a second. Andrew, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, something you said just now about not just talking the talk, but walking the walk reminded me of a quote from our director of EDI at B Lab, Dr. Alonda Williams, said that it's unimpressive and insulting to speak up without action. And tying that to our theory of change at B Lab, one of three pillars of our theory of change is racial equity. And I feel like I'd be remiss not to bring up, our anti-racism stance and how racial equity plays a role in the cannabis industry. You touched on it before, treatment of migrant workers who are like often vulnerable, and the clear racial bias within the industry. And sort of, I guess I'm interested to hear, maybe your perspective, or have other folks that are listening reflect on, what it is that they can do on a personal or organizational or leadership level to start, along their journey. So just to speak from, personal experience at B Lab, it's been hard. It's been slow. Sometimes it's challenging to know if we're making progress or not, but everyone's bought in. And to what you just said, it gives us a sense of purpose to know that we're, being a part of something that's really, the values and the work that we're really living into is also being matched and invested in by the organization, and then hopefully reflected back into the community. You can see, I'll drop in the link, or a link in the chat, of our anti-racism resources that we've linked out on our homepage. But ultimately, folks need evidence-based claims now. And that's definitely like the evolution of what consumers are demanding and what we're seeing. We've seen static responses to COVID and racial injustice. And now there's that next step, like back it up, prove it, what are you doing? And like, where's your ongoing commitment to these things? So yeah, we've seen a lot of great examples within the B Corp community. And, I think it's important to bring that into this conversation as well, not just as far as like, thinking about a theory of change, but also like naming something, that's definitely a focal point, or I understand to be within this industry, and that it needs to be named and addressed as such, because there's so many opportunities to engage with it, on an organizational level and an industry level, and affect all of those different stakeholders along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that in. It's a really important piece in the cannabis industry right now, and how we can look at, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion as core principles that as this industry continues to boom, and as we see these massive, multi-state operators with tons of money coming in and kind of more, let's say, extractive, capitalistic, values. These are Jedi is not being prioritized. And on that point, I want to say something. So one thing we can do, I think, as an industry, and one thing natural products industry has been able to do, is really form these collectives where it's not just you fighting by yourself, but you find a group of other leaders and businesses that all believe in the same thing. So for instance, there's a group called OSC, One Step Closer. I know Reem is one of the, early folks in that organization. And they have a collective called JEDI, J-E-D-I. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Now, they are working to help businesses, bring really those principles into their own business, and also to industries for systemic change overall. And that's really what's needed. So I would highly recommend, I'm going to throw this link in, to check out JEDI. On the website, there's some amazing resources about how you can look at this for your company and even for the industry. And with that, there's actually a few other collectives that have started at OSC, which are worth mentioning. One is the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. We're about to launch a huge collective impact campaign about that, to educate consumers and brands about how they can develop more sustainable packaging. For instance, Neil, was talking earlier about how difficult it is with ice cream and frozen and this sort of thing. one of our clients, Sambazon, the acai company, just came out with the ready-to-eat acai frozen, all biodegradable pack that we can do now. There's things happening within there because lots of companies are pooling their resources together to innovate. There's another collective there. Most relevant for this group is the Cannabis Collaborative. So there's a group, Sun and Earth is part of it, Brother David's, Canacraft, a bunch of other organizations, but retailers and flower company, pretty much all different folks from all over the industry that are coming together to answer this question that McGregor is asking us in this room, which is how do we really create this industry in the most conscious way possible from a systemic standpoint, going beyond just kind of governance and certification. How do we educate consumers? I mean, even educating, for instance, on things like sun-grown versus indoor. I mean, I know when I was in college, everyone wanted indoor, but nowadays, everyone knows the best cannabis is happening outdoors in the sun, and it's the most sustainable, and it's regenerative in the soil, which can pull carbon out of the atmosphere. So there is a collaborative that's together there as a part of OSC, One Step Closer, which are a bunch of brands from the cannabis industry looking at that. And I'll put that link in the chat so y'all can check it out. With that, please, everyone, keep putting in any questions into the Q&A or the chat. Looks like we've got about 8 minutes left. Fellow panelists, anyone, anything else that's inspiring you or you're feeling called to share right now?
I wanted to share something, what you said before, Gagan, around putting pressure on your manufacturers or your packaging partners. So through OSC and the packaging collaborative that you mentioned, we as a collaborative put pressure on the film industry. What I mean by that is, the people making the materials for your packaging. And we, for us, we had done a lot of things to reduce our carbon footprint with post-consumer waste box and soy-based inks and no shrink wrappers and things like that. But our envelope was a multi-layered envelope, and as Neil said, it's you're kind of I want to say victim, but you're just purchasing what you can that's out there, and you're trying to purchase the least expensive package to keep the freshness and et cetera. And so the packaging industry is really behind when it comes to, its environmental footprint and all of the plastics that we're putting into landfills. So we as a collaborative put pressure on that industry to come up with an alternative. And it took us 10 years. So, these things take time, but they're worth it. And it took us 10 years to find new materials, to test those materials. And, 2 or 3 of us now in that collaborative are using a plant-based, we use a plant-based wrapper for our tea bags. And that's reducing about 14 metric tons of virgin plastic that could possibly go into landfills. So those efforts, when you collaborate together with like-minded, you don't think of it as a competition, but think of it as a collaborative to lift, to improve whatever standards you want to improve in the world, whether it's environmental or social. And so we've done that together, and all of us are benefiting from these new materials. They end up being more expensive, but over time, the more companies that purchase these products, the less it gets, and it's an investment worth investing in terms of the climate.
Thank you for that. That's great to have that concrete, story from Numi. Neil, you have something to share as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, as we talk about being socially and environmentally conscious and giving back, it's important to remember that you have to have a great product to back it up. the example that I like to use is organic wine. You know, their heart is in the right place. And obviously farming practices are in the right place, but organic wine has gotten such a bad reputation because it's so often pretty terrible. So it doesn't matter how biodynamic and caring they are and how inclusionary. If you don't have a great product that consumers actually want to pull off the shelf or out of the dispensary, it doesn't matter how good your heart is and how progressive your values are. So really keep that in mind. And that's not just a good tasting product, good smelling product. It also has to do with, you know, with the packaging, so that it doesn't look sophomoric, so that when your consumer goes into a dispensary or a grocery store or wherever else they're going to interact with your product, that they see that you're the real deal and have the product quality to back it up, which then allows you to scale and have maximum impact in giving back, in being progressive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point. Product's not there. Doesn't matter how consciously you make it, right? I want to add one more thing on this. I talked about these different collective impact campaigns. There's one that's really important because there's a lot of talk I can see in the chat around the climate and environmental piece. Obviously, you know, we're facing existential threat here with the climate, and it's the most urgent thing that we can address. And so this group came together, again, off of OSC, called the Climate Collaborative. Now it's over 600 natural products brands that have all signed up across these 9 different commitment areas. There's different, so around your supply chain or around packaging, around advocacy. There's 9 areas specifically around climate. And so we at Guru, at the agency, we actually did a research project where we started looking at how was this working for brands' bottom lines? Like the fact that brands are taking up climate action, how is that actually showing in success of their business and in sales? And we found that it was incredible how much, if you can effectively engage your consumers in climate action and something like climate action, like you're taking a project together, mission, coherence between your mission and their purpose, how much more loyalty they feel to your brand and how much more advocacy that they'll give you. And so, you know, I want to put that out there as well as, like, you know, first off, I'll throw this link in the chat as well. And I'm seeing a question from an attendee about what you can do. Go to the Climate Collaborative. You can see these 9 commitment areas. It's a great place to start around climate if you really want to think about how your company can be a climate action company. 2, go to JEDI, which I mentioned. And there's steps there that you can take about how to really grok the values of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion in your company. To do it, to really integrate it before talking about it, right? Before putting a blog post out there in support or some social media post or something. There's also furthermore, an ebook and this research report that we did at Guru, which I'll share a link to, which is how to effectively engage your consumers in climate action. And it talks about putting together campaigns and marketing and how words to use, all kinds of stuff that could be super helpful for you as you're developing your cannabis brands. And then obviously, as Andrew is sharing, I think from how you really build the most kind of conscious business from the inside out, the B Corp framework is fantastic. I mean, really using that rubric, even if you're not going to become a certified B Corp, you know, use that rubric. You can look at your business at governance and give back and supply chains and how you treat your employees and all these different areas. It's just a great checklist, frankly, that even before Guru became a B Corp, I was kind of utilizing that as a good rubric for how we could be a more conscious business. I'm getting word from the master MC, that we got another 10 minutes. Okay, cool. And we got more people too. So So we've got a few more minutes, about 10. If anyone wants to share any other questions they have, throw it in the chat or in the Q&A. Hopefully we're continuing to answer their questions as they come. Well, this one, I'll just touch on it because I touched on conscious business. And panelists, raise your hand, you know, if you have something you want to add too. But to touch on the conscious business and the farming practices, I just want to hit on the farming practices for a second. I think we've got a real challenge in the cannabis industry, particularly in California, to change the consumer mindset. I mentioned this earlier around sun-grown and regenerative agriculture. Hopefully, a lot of you saw the film Kiss the Ground, which came out last fall. We actually did the marketing and helped put it out. But one of the top things that we can do per the drawdown, Project Drawdown, you know, the drawdown report is regenerative agriculture, meaning how are we growing our plants? Cannabis is just another form of agriculture, right? So how are we growing these plants in a way that can continue to revive the soils, that can pull carbon out of the air and put it back in the ground where it belongs. You know, so something I would really push a lot of you to take a look at, depending on where you're at in the industry. If you're buying flower, if you're cultivating flower, is where is your flower coming from? You know, how can you push your farmers to do regenerative agriculture? Because solutions are out there and cost-effective solutions are out there to do that. And if you need more information on that, the Sun and Earth certification goes very deep into that, and there's consultants that can help around that as well. Let's see, we're getting another question in the Q&A from Nisha. Is the average cannabis consumer asking about certs, farming practices, social equity, et cetera, at the dispensary level? So what I can say from what I've heard, I don't know the formal research that's been done, but what I've heard from doing a lot of listening studies with bud tenders is that folks really are looking for you know, these values in companies. They are asking about kind of what the give back programs are with certain you know, companies. They are asking about where the flower is coming from, how it's farmed, these sorts of things. Now, this is one of the opportunities and challenges when it's early like this in certifications is there's a lot of competing certifications, and none have necessarily generated the brand equity so that a consumer looks at it and knows exactly what that means. You know, like Neil was talking about 1% for the planet. You know, I know that when someone sees 1% for the planet, it's got enough brand equity that consumers know what that means. Okay, 1% of my purchase is going back to protect the planet in some way. So we need to continue building brand equity behind some of these values and some of these certifications. Because consumers do care about it. They are bringing their values into cannabis as well. Reem, would you have something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say that these are the same consumers. So your natural products consumer who cares about these things, and when you see the trends, you'll see organic has risen in terms of desirability. And fair trade has risen in terms of desirability for, you know, the last 15, 20 years. So, so there's crossover. There's, this is the same, generally, I'm assuming, you know, maybe 80% or 50, you can tell me better, but this seems to be a crossover in terms of who this consumer is. And now, I just read an article yesterday about, you know, people are looking for carbon diets. So that's going to be the next new thing is people are going to look at what their carbon footprint is in terms of the products that they're purchasing and how much, you know, how many carbon emissions were reduced or needed to bring that product to shelf. So these are the trends in their natural food industry. And I can only assume that this is a crossover consumer. So.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, what Neil brought up is so fascinating because I actually worked on a project with there's an organic wine collaborative, and they hired Guru to look at how do we how do we, reposition organic wine? Tough brief. Because there's not many that taste great. It is interesting how some consumers, when they move into the aisle where you're working with like mind-altering substances, alcohol, cannabis, psychedelics, others, that they're not necessarily bringing their values as much as they should with them. I think it's a massive opportunity, really, in each of these industries. I mean, like I said earlier, we are the agency for maps as well. We just finished a rebranding. We're putting out a new website, about launching a membership campaign, all this kind of stuff with them. And one of the board members is actually runs an organization around psychedelic conservation initiatives and plant medicine, conserving plant medicine initiatives around the world. And trying to get people, I live in Northern California, you throw a rock, you hit a, in quotes, shaman that's ready to take you on an ayahuasca journey. It's like, just making sure that, you're asking, where are you getting your medicine from? Where are you getting your plants from? And there's not cultural appropriation happening. The plants were grown with the utmost care and with the same principles that you'd want when your tea is grown, or your coffee, or when you walk in the produce aisle, and you wouldn't get a regular tomato instead of an organic tomato. Just trying to get consumers to shop with that overall. And I think, Reem, something you're pointing at, something that we've been really hot on for a while, is just how do we get people to live with a more climate action lifestyle? Like how really can you just, it's not an afterthought. It's like, this is how you live. It's one of the first filters with what you're buying, is that, I want my purchases to reflect the fact that I want my kids to have a planet to play on when I'm gone, or grandkids. So yeah, I think the cannabis industry has, a long ways to go and huge opportunity. And it's going to be a fight, because a lot of money coming in, from more extractive companies. Getting another question in here, Rachel, any advice about regenerative ag for indoor grow? My company is in New York. So I do not have specifically, anything to offer there, but I know that Sun and Earth has been talking about that. I think some of it is, well, first off, can't really do regenerative ag as it's probably coined. Regenerative ag is kind of around soil health, pulling carbon out of the air, putting it into the soil. Not going to happen in your indoor grow. Although, making sure that you're using LED, lights, looking at your water conservation, looking at your energy conservation, and doing offsets as much as possible. There's ways to kind of look at it that way. I think as much as we can, with indoor grows, just because they are right in New York, you got to be doing indoor. Looking at how we can be carbon neutral, at least sustainable as companies, I think is important. But Sun and Earth, again, great spot to look at. They've done some articles specifically about that and have a lot more knowledge than I do. So with that, I think we're going to have to close up. We're going to let the next panel come on in and speak some wisdom, but want to thank my fellow panelists here, Reem and Neil and Andrew. This was fun. Fantastic. I truly hope you all will check out some of the links we shared, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much
for having us.
Bye.
Thanks.